Look at these little things. Even when you're engaged in combat with them and they acknowledge your existence, they don't do anything. They just kind of scuttle around and live their lives. They don't even want to fight you. They're just curious? I don't know. The only thing I know is that this region makes me feel like a total monster. Like, look at this. Even when you hit these little guys, they do nothing. God, they just look so sad. That they're these little seals. They just kind of lay around and do nothing. You can walk on them, you can hit them, and they'll kind of half-assed attack you. It's at least better than the crabs. But ultimately, they just kind of lay there and accept their fate with the most half-assed attempt at trying to stop you I've ever seen. I mean, like, good for them for being so laid back that they don't care when someone is literally trying to kill them. But like, come on, where the hell is your sense of self-preservation? This is not good for our karma. And if that alone was not bad enough, we eventually go into the water, absorb the power of their friends, and use that very power to kill their own kind. Now, in all fairness, these big crabs, they do fight you back and they want to try to kill you, so you don't feel so bad about hurting them. But you can't leave any witnesses alive, so you gotta kill the babies too. But in reality, you just want those sweet, sweet transoceanic pearls that they give you, because we know, ever since the days when Hilly Churl Slimes, Fatui, and Treasure Hoarders were the only enemies with gray items that we needed for character ascension, they've been a lot harder to get. It all started with the handguards in Inazuma, and while they remain to be the meme of the hard item to get, things like the Aramite headbands, their drop rate really isn't that much different from handguards. The drop rates of these items have taken a dip since the items of 1.0, which is really just my way of saying that we have to kill these things. And why? Why'd you give them drops? Couldn't you just make them make meat drops like Sumpter Beasts from Sumeru? And at least Sumpter Beasts, if you stand close to them for too long, they fight you back and they start attacking you, so you know, you don't feel so bad about killing those. At least I didn't. It's just kind of funny because I think Fontaine, of all the regions, it really does make me feel like just a monster for attacking the local wildlife like this, but they have useful drops, so gotta do it. I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way, but you know, aside from that, Fontaine has been an amazing region so far. Normally when a video game announces that they're going to have underwater exploration, underwater combat, it's always met with a bit of wow, good job me. It's always met with a bit of dread because they can be pretty, they can be incredibly pretty areas, but they can also be very tedious. In fact, I would say it's pretty normal for I'm on a roll today. It's pretty normal for video games to be met with criticisms for having too much water in games. We all know the famous IGN, Pokemon Sapphire reviews, whatever, but they tend to be the less enjoyable parts of the game. We have our fun with it, we enjoy it, it looks pretty, we stare at it, and then it becomes the tedious part of the game that we dread doing. But despite having felt that about many games in the past, I just don't feel that way about Fontaine. While the underwater combat at times may feel a little bit iffy because you have to go absorb a power from a thing, and sometimes you might want one, but there's none in the immediate vicinity, it can feel a little bad at times. But when you do get the skills, surprisingly, they actually feel pretty good to use. And really, that's the only bad thing I have to say about the underwater is the powers. I wish we just had them at all times, whether it be having all three and being able to cycle through it with another button, or just something along those lines. But the movement underwater feels amazing. We move quickly enough that we don't feel like we're being penalized like we used to with swimming on the surface. They also gave this lovely little dive to Fontaine characters, and apparently the Hydra Traveler as well, although I've not tested that for myself. However, there's one thing I'm really annoyed at by this. When you plunge attack into the water, especially for something like a polearm character, you don't just dive into the water. They did at least make it so that when you regularly dive off, you dive into the water, but even that animation, they could have been smoothed a little bit, but it's better than nothing. These are truly minor nitpicks, and they're not affecting my experience of exploring this region in the slightest. That's just something that, you know, I thought would happen. The first time I plunged into the water, I expected to maybe submerge, and it just didn't. But in any case, that is a very minor thing, because most of the time, you're just going to be swimming underwater, and goddamn, these areas they managed to make them quite full. Like, yeah, a lot of the time, it's just killing little crabs like this, just regular old enemies that are maybe going to drop you a pearl or two. But that at least is something, and it feels pretty good to kill them with the underwater abilities. They're not too bad, they don't take too long, and they feel relatively smooth to use. For a lot of casual players, this might even feel a lot quicker than killing them on land. Even the enemy variety down here is quite impressive. Yeah, sure, they're not exactly really like the most exciting combat enemies. Like, these aren't things we're gonna see in the Abyss. They're just living creatures that make the waters feel alive and actually full of life. You know, we got seahorses, the crabs, the seals, the little jellyfish. Like, it's not to mention all the little fish swimming around that you can't actually kill, but again, they just make the water feel like there's actually things living here. I also just want to talk about one of my favorite things in Fontaine, that is the local legends. If you haven't fought one of these yet, oh my god, they are fun. Like, the underwater ones, they're not so bad because they were designed to be fought with the underwater abilities, and that means they're relatively easy to take out as long as you follow their mechanics. Oh, but the land ones, they are a different story. These things are quite possibly the hardest single enemy that I have ever had to fight in all of Genshin. The first time that I found this enemy, I thought, hey, you know that purple circle under it looks like it would maybe work with the Numa line mechanic somehow. Maybe you have to weaken this enemy. But you know what? Even if that is the case and there is some quest or something that can weaken these things, I don't want to do it. I just enjoy fighting something that has this much health and does this much damage inside Genshin Impact, especially in the overworld. The overworld has been incredibly easy for a lot of us for a very long time. You know, one of the beauty of open world games is stumbling across something that you really shouldn't be fighting right now. And when you've been playing a game like this for this long, it's really difficult to get that feeling again because my characters are so well built that overworld it's not built for that level of challenge. So it was a very pleasant surprise to have something that just outright kills some of my characters, because usually that's only falling from a height that I thought would be fine and ends up breaking my Zhongli's legs. But even at the beginning of this clip, you saw my Nahida just get whomped, which, you know, that's not exactly the biggest accomplishment. It doesn't take much to kill a Nahida. And luckily for us, the underwater creatures aren't the only thing we got. We also got these weird little geode things, which, to be honest, I don't know what they do. I've killed many of them, but that's in the overworld, so they don't exactly live long enough to do their thing. Clockwork mechas, more robots, but they're not ruin enemies, so somehow they still manage to be a little bit fresh while, you know, being kind of what we're used to. That being said, I would still love to see more ruin graders. It was great that they brought consecrated beasts back. I know for a lot of you it's probably a traumatic memory. You're sick of seeing them in the abyss and having two of them just absolutely destroy your face, but I'm happy to see them come back. For the entirety of the time I've been playing Genshin, I've always been of the mind that, like, the newer region is always the best. Whenever the new one comes out, that becomes my new favorite. It happened with Inazuma, it happened with Sumeru, and of course it happened with Fontaine. But Fontaine is the first time where I'm playing through this region and I'm thinking, I don't know if the next one is going to top this for me. To anyone who's watched some of the tier lists I've made, especially ones like Gacha Splash and for skill effects, they know that I love water. I love underwater areas. I love water effects. And Fontaine, they really did a good job on this, because, like, I also love jungles and forests and nature, but the jungle half of Sumeru, or the forest, rainforest, whatever you want to call it, it didn't quite nail that aesthetic as well as the underwater does. I can't really think of any underwater areas in other video games I've played that look nearly as good as Fontaine's does, especially in the realm of 3D ones. They nailed the underwater caves, and I especially think they nailed the above ground areas. Like, you see me swimming in here, like, just look at this. This is beautiful. I love seeing the light come in here as the sun, like, this is gorgeous. The only thing I can say I wish this had, which I know a lot of you are probably gonna be like, oh god, please no. I want actual dangerous monsters in the water, like sharks swimming around, maybe even like a leviathan of some sort, especially you Subnautica players are the people who will absolutely never touch Subnautica. I am probably wishing for your worst nightmare here, but I don't know, I want it. I have very fond memories of when the WoW Cataclysm expansion came out. I first went down into Vashir and you see the whale shark for the first time. I'm extremely excited to see how they expand on these areas, and I really hope it doesn't end up like the desert where everyone complains about it, because I really enjoy the desert. I think desert's very pretty, but I also understand why people don't like it, because it feels a little barren. You're just running across a desert where there's not a lot to do. So I would love to hear what you guys think about it so far. Are you actually enjoying the underwater areas, especially if you've experienced other games? Like, I can't give you many examples. Like, Guild Wars 2 probably had one of the most developed underwater areas out of any game I've ever played, and that was eventually received very, very poorly. People liked it at first, but it quickly lost its luster and people were not too jazzed about it in the end. But that is all I have. I just wanted to talk about Fontaine because I think they did an excellent job on this region. I personally have the opinion that every region gets better than the last, but this one feels like even a huge step up from Sumeru. So that is all. Remember, you aren't the monster for killing these things because you need their materials. Hoyoverse are the monsters for giving them drops in the first place. So live your best BP oil life and destroy all the living creatures in Fontaine. That was a terrible joke. Thank you to my members and my patrons for supporting me as always. Thank you to you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Attaboy!